What is up, my Lorcana Goons, and welcome back to the Lorcana Goons channel. My name's Kevin, and in this video we're gonna go over some decks that have been doing really well as we are now officially in December. Azurite C meta has been taking over. We have the European Continentals happening this weekend, so I'm gonna go over some decks that you might see there or you might see at your local tournaments. As always, shout out inkdecks.com. You can find the deck lists in the description below in the order that we go through them, and shout out all these awesome tournament organizers and players. First up, we have Top 8 by Nathan Lore. This is a hyper aggro deck from the NJDS tournament. This was a 60-some player tournament. I want to feature this top 8 lists and some other lists that you might see in your future tournaments because hyper aggro is for sure still a thing. You got to respect Daisy Duck and the new Diablo's ability to kind of just squeeze into the hyper aggro lineup alongside the White Rose, which will generate you extra passive lore, kind of the way Merlin Goat does. Obviously, the biggest difference is that the White Rose will not give you lore when it leaves the field, but hey, that's still a free lore that you get to burst off of that one character when you play, and that's pretty good when you're playing other cards like Gathering Strength and Knowledge. You're playing Blues, which also generate you passive lore. You got Donald Duck, which will also give you more lore. We have 3 copies of Befuddle and 2 copies of I'm Stuck. I'm Stuck is a 1-cost action card that features Winnie the Pooh on it. It has an ability that says chosen exerted character can't ready at the start of the next turn. Pretty good action card if you're an aggro deck and you just want to make sure your character survive. You can pick an opposing character that cannot challenge your characters, meaning maybe your Piglet, your Lilo, or your Baloo might survive an extra turn. Befuddle is really good in this deck because you can use it offensively and defensively. You can bounce your opponent's characters to make sure they can't challenge yours, or you can bounce back your 1-cost characters and play them again, kind of like you re-ready them. And we're playing 4 copies of the new Tiana, the restaurant owner. She's a 3-cost uninkable character, 1 strength, 4 willpower. She quests for 2, and she says whenever a character of yours is challenged while this character is exerted, the challenging character gets -3 strength unless the player who controls that character pays 3 ink. Now, it sounds kind of wordy, but basically this is going to allow your characters to survive unless your opponent has enough ink to spare, because paying 3 ink is a lot, and that's for every challenge basically, as long as this Tiana is exerted. So she does have a very low strength, which means that it's a perfect brawl target, Sisu through Ice Block and whatnot, but it's still a very powerful card in hyper aggro. Next up, we have an Amethyst Steel Jafar deck. This is going to be a purple steel deck that features the Floodborn Jafar Striking Illusionist. He's a 7-cost inkable character, 4 strength, 5 willpower, quest for 1, and has evasive, but when he's exerted, if you draw a card on your turn, you get to gain 1 lore. So pretty cool combo if you can shift this, sing Whole New World, draw 7 cards, gain 7 lore, right? And you're playing a bunch of other draw cards in this deck like I'm Still Here, Bosses on a Roll, we have Friends on the Other Side, Rabbits, Genies, we even have the Lamp. 1 copy of the Lamp in this deck, which is an action card that basically has 2 abilities in this deck because you control both Jafar and Genie. So you can banish this item, and if you have a character named Jafar, you draw 2 cards. Then if you have a character named Genie in play, you can return a character of cost 4 or less to the player's hand. So having both Genie and Jafar in this deck, especially now that you have like really good Genie targets, means that this Lamp can go off with both of its abilities. So as a 2-cost item that has 2 abilities that basically free, not too shabby in my opinion. And we got copies of the new Tinkerbell as well, the Tinkerbell, the Surfer Tink as I call her, 3 strength, 1/3 stat line that has evasive, quest for 2 for some early aggression, and then you also have the shiftable Tinkerbell right there, so you can keep questing for 2 after that. But shout out Julian Petit for getting top 8 at the 60+ player European tournament. In 3rd place of this tournament, we have Minato 45 playing a different version of a purple steel, not necessarily Tinkerbell Jafar control, but more aggressive is what it's looking like, because we have a variety of 1-drop 12 actually, the 4 Broom, 4 Diablo, and 4 Chernobog followers, followed by 4 copies of Doc, Calhoun, Snake, Lawrence, me, Fox, the Genie Wish Fulfilled, Go, all of these at 4 with Library, right? And then we're also playing 2 Pete's, 3 Crabs, 2 Fire the Cannons, 2 Yzma, the Chemist, and we're playing 3 Elsa the Fifth Spirit. This is more of a, it looks like more like a tempo Amethyst Steel deck, but kind of aggro too, you know what I mean? Because you have a lot of 2 questers in this deck. You have the Lawrence and the Smees alongside the Genie to quest for 2 every time, right? But then you have some passive explore too with the 4 libraries and the 4 goats. So I really like Amethyst Steel right now. It's in a good position, I think, because you're able to take control of the early game. You can control the early game with characters like Snakes, me, even actions like Fire the Cannons. And then as you do that, as you control the early game, you're also gaining lore because you're playing a lot of characters that either quest for 2, or maybe you're using Calhoun to gain lore every time you challenge a character. You also have a lot of draw power with the Docs and the Yzmas and the Genies. So there's a lot that this deck can do. You pretty much have anything you can ask for in the meta right now with Amethyst Steel. I do want to highlight this legendary Yzma card. I feel like this card is a little bit underrated. People don't use it that much, but she draws 3 cards if you have no cards in hand, right? You got to exert her. If you have less than 3, you draw until you have 3. So it's a pretty good card in my opinion. It's kind of like Doc, but a little bit different. Doc does make you discard cards in hand, so if your hand is not empty, you will discard a card. But Yzma is inkable. It's a 4-cost inkable. The stat line is kind of mid because it is a 3/3, and you have to exert her, not quest, to get the ability. But she quests for 2, so maybe you can also quest with her. I do want to explore this Yzma a little bit more though. In second place of this tournament, we have Julian Magnan playing Emerald Steel. We love to see it. Emerald Steel is still very popular in this meta and still very good. Playing some cards that we haven't seen in a minute, like You're Welcome. I don't really see people playing You're Welcome in Emerald Steel. It's a 4-cost song that says shuffle chosen character, item, or location into the deck, and that player draws 2 cards. So some pretty good location removal if you want to have locations removed from the opposing side of the board. Maybe there's a castle that you're staring down that you can't get rid of, right? You're Welcome might be a good card for that. Also pretty good to hit your own characters. Maybe if you want to shuffle back in a Go-Go Tamago, a Clarabelle or something, but you get to draw 2 cards, which is pretty good after that, right? So there is potential there, I think, in Emerald Steel, especially if you're playing a more discard variant, but not many actually no discard cards in this Emerald Steel list. So it's looking more like a Floodborne Emerald Steel list because we're playing 4 copies of Beast Tragic Hero, 4 Tinkerbell, 4 Clarabelle, 3 Robin Hood, and to spice things up a bit, 2 copies of Chief Bogo. Yes, this Chief, buy one, get one. He's a 4-cost, uninkable, 2 strength, 4 willpower that can quest for 2. And he says whenever you play a Floodborne character, deal 1 damage to each opposing character. I like this card. I've always liked this card. I don't know how many you can really afford to play in a deck in general, but it's a good card. Anytime you play a Floodborne character, you trigger a Tinkerbell style effect where you deal 1 damage to everything. It's an AoE. It's a great way to deal with Ward in the meta, I think, right? You trigger this twice and boom, your opponent's Prince John is no longer on the field. You do this 4 times, or you do it twice with the Grab Your Swords. Boom, your opponent's Muses is now gone from the field. And I don't think it's really asking too much when you're playing Diablo also as a really early game Floodborne character. And you have all these shiftable characters in here too, like Morph, the 1-drop Diablo, and the Clarabelle. So kudos to you, Julian, for getting 2nd place at the 60+ player tournament with an Emerald Steel list that I have not seen before. And then 1st place of this tournament, we have a red-blue deck by Gurek E. Curiel. This is going to be a Ruby Sapphire deck. Normally, like we see them, right? It's playing the ramp cards of How Far I'll Go. We have the new Sail the Azurite Sea and 4 copies of Tipo. That's going to be the ramp in this deck because we're not playing Fishbone Quill anymore. It's looking like we don't need Fishbone Quill in this meta, right? But you do have the 4 Grammatala, 4 Flavorsham with a bundle of items right here like the Popsicles and Vitalis Spheres with Lucky Dime. Realistically, only 6 items now that you can really choose from to pop off Flavorsham because you don't really want to destroy your Lucky Dime, right? But that's okay because later on in the game, you can just grab it back with Tamatoa anyways, right? And if you don't have Tamatoa, maybe you want to play a Mufasa instead. It's looking like we're seeing some Mufasa in this tournament. Mufasa, the ruler of Pride Rock, is a 8-cost uninkable character, 4 strength, 9 willpower that can quest for 4. Has an ability that says when you play this character, pick 2 random cards from your inkwell and add them to your hand. And another ability that says whenever this character quests, you may ready your ink, which is very powerful. If you let this character survive on the opposing board, it kind of feels like your opponent has 2 turns, and that's 2 turns for your opponent to use all their ink in a deck that can have up to like 15, even 20 ink sometimes. So red-blue still very powerful in the meta. It has a lot of removal in the early game and especially in the late game. So be aware of this deck. In fact, red-blue also took 1st place at a 26-player box tournament. This was a D23 box battle. Christian Y taking 1st place with his red-blue deck, looking very similar to the one we just saw, except this one is playing 2 copies of Scar. Scar is a 7-cost uninkable, 6 strength, 5 willpower with rush. And he quests for 2, which is very good for your dime. Has an ability that says during your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, you may ready this character. He can't quest for the rest of the turn. This basically lets you challenge as many characters as possible because you're constantly re-readying your Scar as long as Scar has enough willpower to survive. One of the really cool plays is you can use Popsicle to heal your Scar in the middle of challenging all these opposing characters. He's not a song, obviously, so he's not going to get hit by anything like Bare Necessities or Ursula. So sometimes you want to have Scar in a deck like this because, as we've been seeing in the early decks right now, there's a lot of aggro going on. A lot of purple steel with 1-drops, a lot of purple yellow playing a bunch of 1-drops, even red purple getting pretty aggressive nowadays. So Scar definitely has a place in this meta in this deck. In third place of this D23 box tournament, we have a Sapphire Amber deck by Greg S. This is a deck that I was really excited to feature on the channel today. It's pretty cool. I love it. We got some hero synergy. We also have some princesses. Even Baymax is in this deck. He's a 5-cost inkable, 2 strength, 6 willpower that quests for 2 and says when you play this character and whenever he quests, you may remove up to 2 damage from another chosen character. Gain 1 lore for each damage removed this way. So it's a little bit of lore burst in a deck where you have a lot of early game aggression. As you can see, we have 12 1-drops, Nala, Kita, and Daisy Duck. This is going to let you quest in the early game very confidently. You also got Anna bearing the storm. This is a cool card. She's a 2-cost inkable, 1 strength, 4 willpower. That's very good stats in my opinion. And if you have another character in play that's a hero, she'll quest for 2 instead of 1. We got Duke Weaselton, not to be confused with Duke of Wesselton. No. This is Duke Weaselton over here. He has Ward. He's a 1 strength, 2 willpower that quests for 2. Not necessarily guaranteed to always quest for 2, right? But that Ward makes him pretty sticky on the board, lets you generate a lot of lore in a deck like this when you're kind of playing an aggro style, right? 4 copies of Alice Growing Girl. Wow, this is not something I really see play, right? So your other characters gain support, right? And when this character has 10 strength or more, she gets +4 lore. So there's a world where she can quest for 5, right? If she has enough strength. But your characters have to have and the ability of support to be able to trigger this, and they give them all support, right? So you can quest with all your characters that have support, stack the strength onto your Alice, and then Alice can quest for 5, right? In order to do that, you need some some powerful characters, right? Some characters with some big strength but we got Scrooge McDuck over here. He's a 5/5, 5 strength, 5 willpower that can quest for 2 and only costs 4. His big drawback is that he is uninkable, right? But that's not too bad when you're playing an aggro deck. That's a pretty good curve in my opinion. And if this has support, that's 5 strength that you can give to your Alice, right? You can play Alice and then Scrooge on curve, which is cool. We also got 3 of the Wendy darlings. She's a 3 strength, 1 willpower character. She has ward and support. So maybe you can even sit on your Wendy darling while you set up your Alice, because she'll have ward. She'll stick on the board for a little bit. We got Joshua Sweet as a bodyguard character for Rapunzel, for our draw engine for Sven, which is pretty nice. This lets you re-ready your characters, which is another way of letting your characters survive, maybe for that Alice. For Kita, to ensure that we can stop our opposing characters from challenging our characters, because when Kita is played, all the characters on the board lose 3 strength. This is the Floodborn Kita. That includes your characters, by the way, but you're not really trying to challenge with this deck anyway, from what it's looking like. You're really just trying to get to 20 as fast as possible. Stop your opponent from challenging your characters, maybe even slap some locations on, because we have Neverland here. This is a vanilla location that'll just generate 1 lore every start of the turn. And we also have McDuck Manor at 4, very good against the Sapphire decks. I feel like some of the Sapphire decks are not prepared for a location like McDuck Manor right now. Pretty good card. This is going to generate you 2 lore at the start of your turn, every turn. 4 cost, inkable, 1 move cost, but there's no effect. But 9 willpower. 9 willpower is really big for a location, and I think some of us forget that, right? Next up, we have a Ruby Amethyst Burn deck that took first place at a box tournament in Poland. We've covered this deck on the channel before, but I like that this deck is playing some cards we haven't seen before. We got 2 copies of Pegasus the Flying Steed. This is a 2-cost inkable character with evasive, 3 strength, 1 willpower. That's pretty much it. Just a good character to play on turn 2 that can have evasive and that you can use later on, maybe to contest the Diablo. We got the Peter Pan Shadow Finder in this deck, which is also very good for contesting Diablo. It's a rush character with evasive as well. 2 strength, 3 willpower. And your other characters with evasive also gain rush, which means if you slap a Maui Half Shark on board while your Peter Pan Shadow's on the board as well, your Maui Half Shark will be able to challenge that same turn, possibly guaranteeing you an action back from the discard pile that you might have already had there from the early game, because you can play Gathering Knowledge on turn 2, maybe Brawl on turn 3, or Sing Friends on the other side. And if your Maui Half Shark has evasive, your opponent might not be playing around the fact that this Peter Pan will give him Rush as well. And every time you play an action with this Maui Half Shark on the board, you generate an extra lore, which is very good for this type of burn style deck because you're playing 4 Goat, 4 Thievery, and you're also playing cards like Gathering Knowledge and Wisdom. All these cards will generate you passive lore. Thievery in particular also makes your opponent lose a lore, which is pretty good. We are not playing the Pirate's Life in this deck, which is very interesting, but only 4 copies of Thievery, which is kind of like a mini Pirate's Life that only costs 1, and they can't snipe it out of your hand with a Ursula or something like that. No rabbits in this deck. We have 4 Genie instead, 3 Brawl, and 1 It Calls Me. It Calls Me is a song that costs 1. It says draw a card, then choose up to 3 cards from chosen opponent's discard and shuffle them into the deck. This is really good against those Amber Steel decks that have reoccurring Lilos, and even against those Amber Steel decks when you're in crazy situations, you can shuffle back in their Goons characters. You know, maybe their Robin Hood, their Queen, or even something really small that's not going to be too threatening against you, hoping that they'll draw into it at a bad time. I like this deck a lot. I think it's a high contender for one of the best decks of the format, but the Amber Steel matchup is really hard for this deck. But you have a lot of 1-drops and crabs to kind of help you out there. The 3 Chernobog Followers, Diablo, and Broom in here, a total of 9 1-drops. And because it is a red-purple deck, you can play 3 Be Prepared in this deck as well. But shout out to you, Emmanuel Bach, for getting first place at this tournament. Next up, we have a top 8 deck from the Coliseum of Comics 2K tournament. This is by Chris Garay. Shout out you. We have a Tinkerbell Amethyst Steel deck. I like this deck a lot. We have also covered a deck like this on the channel, displaying 4 of the following Chernobog Followers: Diablo, Snakes, me, Fox, the White Rose, which is a very strong character. Like, I genuinely think this card is very good. It's a 3-cost Tinkable. When you play it, you generate a lore. That's pretty simple, but it's just so strong in a deck like this where you're gaining passive lore with characters like Tinkerbell as well, the Surfer Tink, which I like to call her. We're also playing Goats and Genies, which are also going to give you a lot of lore. I love to see it. Amethyst Steel tempo decks right now. They're just doing so much in the meta. You also got Calhoun. Calhoun is one of the top cards of the Azurite C set. It's a 2-cost, uninkable that has resist +1, 2 willpower, and 3 strength. And every time you challenge and banish a character with Calhoun, you get to gain 2 extra lore anyways. So the moment you play Calhoun on the board, it stops a lot of the opposing like 1s and 2-drops. Even in a mirror match where you're going first or second, as you set up some Diablos, Churnabogs, maybe even some Snakes and Smees, if your opponent drops an opposing Calhoun, you're just in an interesting position because you can quest, but then they're going to start gaining 2 lore. They don't even take a lot of damage because that Calhoun has resist +1, so you need a character with 3 strength or higher to clear it in one shot. Very good card, very sticky character. Shout out you, Chris, for getting top 8 with Purple Steel. Another deck in top 8 of this same tournament, we have Nathan Charton with a yellow-green deck. This is awesome. I really like the way this yellow-green deck looks. Kind of an aggressive list because we are playing a bunch of 1-drops. We got 4 Daisy, 4 Pegasus, and 2 Nala. Then you want to curve that into maybe some Lilos. This is the Lilo Escape Artist, Zombie Lilo, Treeborn Lilo as they call her. This Lilo has an ability that says at the start of your turn, if this card is in your discard, you may play her and she enters play exerted. You do have to pay the ink to do that, and you have to trigger that ability before you draw your card for turn, by the way. But still a great card nonetheless, because if you're playing an aggro deck like this, you might lose to Be Prepared, but this card can just come back the turn after they Be Prepared you, right? For Piglet, Ursula, we have 2 copies of the Rooster Hey Hey, the Emerald Hey Hey that lets you ramp an extra ink on your turn if your opponent has more ink than you. Pretty good card. 4 copies of Jacques. It's a 1/4 Emerald character that can quest for 2 and has an ability that says when you play this character, chosen opposing character gains Reckless during their turn. Very nice way to not only maybe stop an opposing Diablo from exerting or something like that, but maybe you want to combine this with a card like Tiana. This is the Tiana we went over earlier that is very good in aggro decks, and we also have some other nice cards to complement aggro decks like Sven, which will ready your aggressive characters. We got 4 Rapunzel to draw cards. We got 4 Cricky, which will quest for 3 3. And Cricky is really good in a deck like this, I think, because you're playing a lot of characters with heavy willpower. We have the Jock, Tiana, Rapunzel. Cricky is going to give them all 3 strength if you play this character, which will not only let you get some really good trades in sometimes, but it also might help you clear some locations, because a lot of decks try to slap locations against green characters, thinking that it's going to go their way because you don't have a lot of like strong characters. As you can see, everybody here has 1 to 2 willpower until you get to Sven, right? But the moment you get to that 5 ink range, this Cricky can really turn that game around. Some other cool 5 cost characters in here. It's like a high 5 deck. Not a single character costs more than 5 ink in this deck. So we also have 2 Don Carnegie, 4 copies of the new Goofy Shipwright. Very good card. It's a 5 cost inkable that has 1 strength, 4 willpower. He quests for 3, has ward, which as we've been talking about earlier means it'll more than likely always quest for 3. Whenever this character quests, chosen character gains ward until the start of your turn. Pretty awesome to see. You can give ward to a Piglet, maybe to one of your other characters that's going to quest for 2 for sure. Maybe you want to even give ward to a Cricky to make sure he'll quest for 3 next turn. That way your opponent cannot target it with any abilities. Pretty awesome to see this Goofy from Azurite Sea find some play in the meta. We have 4 copies of Nani, 4 copies of Pegasus because we are playing the mini peg, so we can shift up there, and 4 copies of Just in Time. Time for Justin, they said. This is a 3 cost uninkable action that says you may play a character with cost 5 or less for free. Very cool card. Obviously on turn 3 you want to be able to slap this on the board and play that Goofy, play your Nani, or maybe even play your Cricky and get some good value there, right? You also have 1 copy of You Came Back, which is another uninkable action card, 3 cost, that says ready, chosen character. Period. That's it. Such an amazing effect. So simple. Just ready, chosen character. So anytime you quest with a character and you're afraid it's going to get banished by an opposing character, you just play You Came Back and he's ready. You can quest again or you could just pass depending on how you want to play that. But questing again is also really good if you have something like Cricky or Goofy, because you're going to be questing for 6 that turn. Very awesome deck to see. Shout out Nathan for getting top 8 at this tournament. Next up, we have a first place list from a Set 6 Shadow Berlin tournament. This is by Tony Shalouche. This is going to be a green-purple deck. We've seen this deck plenty of times as well, this format, but I haven't seen people really play Olaf in this deck. We have 2 copies of those. Also, 1 copy of Maleficent Biding Her Time, which will let you quest for 2. Not too bad. I love the 2 copies of Shakira. Very awesome card. This Emerald Gazelle costs 2. She's going to have 1 strength, 2 willpower, can quest for 1, and can give evasive to a character until the start of your next turn. Very cool, actually, because if you ever want a character to survive one of the turns, like a bonsai or something, you just give evasive to your bonsai, and more than likely your opponent can't clear it unless they have an evasive character. Green purple's pretty good. We're also playing 1 copy of Library. Usually I've seen green purple decks play the Clarabelle Shift package line, but this deck is not. So there you go. Maybe you don't have to play the Clarabelle Shift line if you don't want to. This was a 37 player tournament, so I think that there's definitely some valid arguments to playing green purple like this. You are still playing the Shift Ursula though, the Sea Witch Queen, which will let you quest for 3. She is a 7 cost inkable character, so if you can't really play her, you just ink her away. But if you can shift her on that turn 5, questing for 3 is really powerful, and it'll give you the ability to also exert a chosen character, and has that extra ability that says characters can't sing while this character is on the board other than her. We got 4 Kick Cloud Kicker in this deck, which seems very powerful in this meta. I think there's a lot of characters that you can just return to the opposing hand, and that's going to really generate you some good tempo, especially if you're going second, right? We have 3 copies of Genie, because Genie just seems like one of the best cards in purple right now. In second place of this Shadow Berlin tournament, we have a Purple Steel deck, again, by Felix Kahn. Once again, Purple Steel doing very well in tournaments. This is a more tempo style list. We have some 8 1-drops is what it's looking like, with the 2 Calhoun, Smeeze, and Snakes to play on turn 2. Then on turn 3, you want to go Fox, Crab, or Pete, maybe slow the opposing actions down, or just play a White Rose, because White Rose, like I said, is just a good character to play on turn 3. It guarantees you a lure when you play it, right? You got some draw power with your 4 friends on the other side, 2 copies of Rabbit, and 4 copies of Genie. I think you want to play a ratio of Rabbits and Genies in a deck like this, because you are playing the bounce characters, and there are still those times where bouncing a Rabbit is still a very good play. 2 copies of Belle the Accomplished Mystic. I've been seeing a lot of people ask me for this card and also just play it in their decks. It's a shiftable Belle character, 5 cost, inkable, 4 strength, 4 willpower. She quests for 2, and she has an ability that lets you move 3 damage from a character to a chosen opposing character. Really cool to play around stuff that has resist as well, and just a very strong character to be able to use as removal. 4 copies of Elsa the Fifth Spirit, and 2 copies of Gantu, Captain Crankyhead. He's an awesome card, I'm telling you. 5 cost inkable, 4 strength, 3 willpower, quest for 4, right? And in a deck like this where you're playing White Rose, you're playing Goats, you're playing Genies that'll quest for 2, I feel like you're going to get to a point where if you have 16 lore and you play this Gantu, your opponent basically has to out it before you win. Although it does lose to Smash and Along Came Zeus, which are 2 big steel removal cards that I'm seeing a lot in these recent meta. But shout out to you, Felix, for hitting second place with Purple Steel and with Gantu in your deck. Purple Steel is so popular. It was also in top 8 of the same Set 6 Shadow Berlin tournament. Shout out you, Maria, for getting top 8 with Purple Steel, playing cards like Lawrence. This is a 3-cost inkable character, 0 strength, 4 willpower, but he will land on the board with 4 strength. And can quest for 2. A lot of 2 questers in this deck, like the Genie, the Tinkerbell, and we're even playing 1 copy of Giant Tinkerbell, 4 copies of Library to generate some passive lore. Also, maybe have some extra threats that can draw you some cards every time a character is banished there. A lot of 1-drops in this deck for Diablo, for Maleficent biding her time to quest for 2, and for Robin Hood, because you are playing the 2 copies of Robin Hood, Champion of Sherwood, and 2 copies of Gantu, Captain Crankyhead. Wow, we just saw Gantu in the last list too. Love to see it. We're playing only 2 copies of the White Rose, but we have the 4 Genie. Genie just is that card this format, man. Every purple deck is playing at least 2 to 4 copies of Genie. I like the 1-ofs in this list as well. 1 copy of Benja to respect items, and 1 copy of Magic Broom, the Aerial Cleaner, which will let you clean up an opposing Diablo, because this will have evasive on your turn. However, if that opposing Diablo is at a cove, that broom does not have enough strength to do so. Not a single action in this deck, just locations and characters. Doc is a very good card in this deck as well. Acts as a draw engine. Cost 2, uninkable, but he has 1 strength, 3 willpower, so he'll definitely quest for some lore there. And I'm sure we've all been facing an opposing Doc or a person who's playing Doc, and it really feels silly when they play 1-drops, play their Doc, draw 2 cards, then they play another card, play a new Doc, draw 2 more cards. I feel like this Doc card is definitely something to worry about. In top 8 of this same tournament, we have a red-yellow Mufasa deck by Jacob. Shout out you for putting red-yellow Mufasa on the map again. Haven't seen this color combination in a minute. We have Daisies, Mulans, the Queens, the new Lilos, Lumiere, Mother Gothel, and Rapunzel, which will let you draw cards for healing your Mother Gothel and Mulan. 1 copy of Julieta Madrigal, which has a similar ability. 2, Super Goof. I like Super Goof a lot this meta. There's so many early game aggressive characters, even like Calhoun, for example, a bunch of characters like that we're seeing all these Purple Steel decks play. And if you have Super Goof in your deck, you're able to challenge them, generate 2 lore, and more than likely survive that challenge, because Super Goof has 4 willpower. Speaking of Goofy, we're playing another Goofy here. I haven't seen this Goofy yet. He's a 6-cost uninkable character with 5 strength, 5 willpower, and he has evasive and rush. So pretty cool card. It lets you eliminate opposing characters that have evasive and rush at the same time, which is cool. He does only quest for 1, unfortunately, but still a decent card nonetheless. We are playing 4 copies of Mufasa. After all, it is a Mufasa deck, and if you're able to have this Mufasa banished, you have some pretty cool cards you can hit off of this to trigger the ability, right? So you have Maleficent Monstrous Dragon, that's a heavy hitter. The Surfer Stitch, another heavy character in this deck. This is a 7-cost inkable character, 4 strength, 8 willpower, quest for 2, and says when you play this character, if you have 2 more characters in play, you may draw 2 cards. And that's not asking too much in a deck like this, because you're also playing Gaston. This is the 3-cost Gaston. He's uninkable, 2 strength, 4 willpower, but you can use the ability to exert Gaston and pay 2 less for the next character you play, meaning that you can play Gaston on turn 3, and then turn 4 you can start playing your 6-cost characters like that Goofy, Madame Medusa, Lady Tremaine maybe, Stitch Abomination, and the new Judy Hopps right here. We have the new Judy Hopps, 6-cost inkable character, 3 strength, 6 willpower, and has support. She also has another ability that says at the end of your turn, you may ready chosen character, meaning if you combo Gaston and Judy Hopps together, you can re-ready your Gaston. So the following turn, you will be able to use Gaston's ability again and trigger that Surfer Stitch if you have it in hand and can play it that turn. Pretty cool. We do have some actions in this deck though, which means your Mufasa won't always trigger, like 3 Brawl, 1 Revive, 1 Teeth and Ambitions, and 1 World's Greatest Criminal Mind, which complements the Queen very nicely, and Minnie Mouse as well. Minnie Mouse right here, she's a musketeer Minnie Mouse. She has an ability that basically is the same thing as World's Greatest Criminal Mind. You can pop a character with 5 strength or more, and the Queen Commanding Presence will let you manipulate the opposing character's strength, which is really strong. So very good combo pieces in this deck. Love to see it. World's Greatest Criminal Mind and Minnie Mouse Musketeer, by the way, are also very good at getting rid of Maui Shark, because that Maui Shark is just a sitting duck against those cards. Next up, we have a red-purple deck taking first place at a Win a First Chapter case tournament. Pretty cool pricing for that one, by the way. This is by Dan Van Nieuwenberg. Shout out you. This looks like a pretty standard Ruby Amethyst list, but we are playing the Shift Sisu package. We have the Flynn Sisu right there, but we're also playing the Shift Sisu 8 cost. This is the Empowered Sibling, 8 cost uninkable. When you play her, you can banish every character on the opposing board with 2 strength or less. Pretty strong, in my opinion. Can quest for 3 as well, which in Ruby Amethyst is actually pretty good, right? No locations, though. That's what I wanted to talk about with this deck. And people really are not playing locations in Ruby Am anymore. I've seen this conversation before. Had this conversation with Ed2, actually, the winner from DLC Fort Worth, who won with Ruby Amethyst, and he was saying he doesn't feel like locations are necessarily needed in the deck anymore, especially when you just have power cards like the 3 Genie, 3 Rabbit ratio, 3 Elsa as well, 4 Maui, and you got Medusa, Tremaine, and B-Preps for your removal. Maybe you just want to be able to generate lore with your Flynn, your Sisus, and your Goats, and maybe you just don't need locations, right? But maybe you can also play locations like some of these other decks. I do really like the Shift Sisu, though. I feel like it might have to be a card that I'm going to play in my upcoming tournaments as well. There's just so much Amber Steel. There's like green purple. There's so many purple steel as well. So many aggressive decks. And sometimes it feels like you have a tough matchup against certain steel decks. And this Shift Sisu does really give you that extra advantage sometimes. And in second place of this Win a First Chapter case tournament, we have a Ruby Sapphire deck by Tyrone Hero Nemo. Shout out you for getting second place at this tournament. This is a red-blue deck, but we're playing 2 copies of A Pirate's Life. This is the card we were talking about earlier. Each opponent loses 2 lore, you gain 2 lore, and you can sing this because it is a 6-cost song. You can also sing together with this card, actually, so you can use a combination of 2 Sisus or maybe a Grandma and a Sisu to gain 2 lore, make your opponent lose 2 lore, which might be pretty good against aggro decks. It looks like you have a lot of things against aggressive decks in this deck because you are playing the Queen of Hearts. You're playing the 2 copies of the Sisu Daring Visitor alongside the 2 Ice Block. I also like the addition of Gold Coin in this deck. I've been seeing some Red Blue players play this. Gold Coin is a Ruby item that costs 1. It's inkable, and it says pay 1 ink, exert this item, banish this item, and then you may ready one of your characters, but it can't quest for the rest of the turn. Basically giving a character on your side of the board the ability to challenge twice. And it is only your character, so you can't do it on the opposing character. So that is pretty cool. You can use this to swing into a character, re-ready, and then swing again. Maybe you want to do that with a Maui or even a Maui Half Shark, which will let you get 2 actions that turn potentially, right? And you have a lot of actions to pick from if you're using the Maui Half Shark ability, because you got 4 copies of Sail the Azurite Sea, Visions of the Future, Brawl. We also got 2 B-Prep and 3 How Far Go with 1 Let It Go and 1 Lucky Dime. Also want to point out that 4 Maui Half Shark is what is being played in this deck. I don't know if you're overcommitting there or if 4 might not be enough, but Maui Half Shark seems like the card of the format right now. It does feel like a 4 of, though, because you get to a point in this game where you're just playing Maui Shark after Maui Shark, right? There's only so much removal in the game, and your opponent can only do so much against 4 Maui Sharks in your deck, especially if you're digging for them with Visions of the Future. In third place of this case tournament, we have an Amber Steel Locations deck. This looks like the location deck that we saw in the top cut of DLC Seattle. Really cool deck playing a variety of locations. We have Neverland, Bayou, Nottingham, Seven Doors Mine, the Underworld, and Pride Lands all at 4. Some of these locations are going to have more willpower than the others. Some of them don't have any abilities at all. Some of them have some pretty good abilities like Dwarves Mine, which will let you deal 1 damage if you move a character there. And if you move a knight character there, you'll deal 2 damage instead, right? Which is pretty good in combination with Doc over here, which we've gone over. It's a pretty small draw engine for a deck like this, but you're also playing some pretty cool cards that'll let you generate some advantage to make sure you can keep drawing cards. While you generate that advantage, you have Fix-It Felix Jr. He's a 2-cost inkable character with 1 strength, 3 willpower that says when you play this character, if you have a location in play, you can draw a card. So not only does this draw a card in your deck, right, but you get extra benefits for having locations in play. So you're setting up your win con in the early game by playing multiple of these 1-cost locations, and then you could just start drawing some cards with Fix-It Felix. So you're gaining passive lore and and regenerating your hand. And there's even a Floodborn Fix-It Felix Jr. to give your locations extra willpower, which is pretty nice in my opinion. Then we have a John Silver Greedy Treasure Seeker to really synergize with our locations. Every time you play a location, he gets resist +1 and +1 lore. So it's a static ability. If you have 3 locations on board, you play the John Silver and bam, he comes in with resist +3 and +3 lore. So he'll quest for 4 and he's a pretty sticky character. Love to see it. Location deck, very powerful, I think. Looks like we have a lot to worry about in this meta. I'm telling you, there's a lot of aggro decks. There's so many aggro decks, and this even gets to play removal because you have 4 Fire the Cannons, right? I would even go as far as to say Calhoun the Goon feels like some removal in this deck because you're playing a character that is going to stop your opposing characters from questing, or even if they challenge, because they're going to have to challenge into your locations, right? Whenever they challenge, your Calhoun's going to get a lot of value. So I like Calhoun a lot in this deck, or in location-based decks in general. In top 4 of this case tournament, we have Michael Pazmans with an Emerald Steel list. Very reminiscent to the Emerald Steel list that we've been seeing since the last format. You got the Diablo shift package with a Hidden Cove to really anger some opponents right there. That just feels like a deadly combo sometimes when you play Diablo on 1, Cove on 2, shift Diablo, move him to the Cove. Because now that Diablo is a 3/3 with evasive on turn 2, and that is almost impossible to remove. In order for you to win the game, though, you have to make sure you get to 20 lore, so you are playing some heavy questers like the Prince John, which not only quests for 2 in a simplified game state, but you're definitely going to want to keep this guy alive because every time they discard a card, you're going to draw a card, right? So you also have the Tinkerbell Giant Fairy, Beast Tragic Hero, Anna, Diplomatic Queen. Those are all 2 questers. Like we were talking about with the Prince John, you got a discard engine as well. Ursula, Deceiver of All, Hypnotize and Sudden Chill, and we don't talk about Bruno. All very powerful cards to discard cards from the opponent's hand and even remove cards from the field because of that Bruno right there. And then we're also playing more songs, right? Let the Storm Rage On, Strength of a Raging Fire to really maximize the value on that Ursula, Deceiver of All, I think. And we're playing 1 copy of Gogo Tamago, 1 copy of Doc, the Bold Knight, which are pretty cool 1-ofs, and the 3 copies of Morph Space Goose so that we can shift into our Beast early or our Tinkerbell early as well. Muses also has really good synergy with the amount of songs we're playing because then you can bounce cards to the opponent's hand and discard them with Sudden Chill. Amazing. And last but not least, we're playing Peak Games because Be Prepared is our enemy. Another Amethyst Steel list in top 8, looking pretty aggressive. Yannick Dupin, shout out you for getting top 8 with Amethyst Steel. Another deck playing Gontus, Yzmas. This one is playing 3 copies of Castle though, but we're playing 2 copies of Strength and 4 copies of Fire the Cannons. Maybe that's what you want to consider for your Amethyst Steel aggro deck players out there. A lot of 1-drops, 4 Turnibox, 4 Diablos, 4 Broom, and 4 Maleficent biding her time with the 2 Calhoun the Goon. Love to see it. I like Calhoun in these aggro decks, man, especially if you're playing some locations, you know. I would probably want to see maybe a library in this deck, or maybe even the Casi Madrigal to get your opponent to challenge into them, and then your Calhoun has some extra value. But yeah, Amethyst Steel players out there, let me know how you're playing the deck. Are you playing a Jafar version? Are you playing this aggro version? Or are you going to play more of a mid-range style with the Tinkerbells? You know, there's a lot of ways you can play Amethyst Steel, but it's looking like a deck that you really have to prepare yourself for. Now we have a first place Amber Steel deck from the Win 2 box tournament at the Esports Nimes Arena. This is an Amber Steel song list. You know, this looks like the way I picture Amber Steel song when somebody tells me they're playing Amber Steel song. We have the Cinderella, the Ballroom Sensation to let you sing your Strength, your Let the Storm Rage On, and your World's Greatest Criminal Mind early just in case, right? And then we're also playing the Cinderella Stout-Hearted, which is a shift character for Cinderella that can quest for 3 and challenge ready characters like ward characters. We're also playing 4 copies of Along Came Zeus, which I think is really good in this meta, especially with all these genies running around and some of these like location decks running around. Along Came Zeus feels like a very good card, and you can sing Along Came Zeus with your Ursula Vanessa, you can sing it with your Ariel, and you can sing it with your Prince Naveen, right? So pretty cool card in this deck alongside World's Greatest Criminal Mind, which I think people are playing because of the popularity of Maui Shark. Maui Shark just has 7 strength, and that has been perfect range for this World's Greatest Criminal Mind. 3 copies of Lawrence to quest for 2, 3 copies of Pluto to protect our 2 questers, and we're playing the Robin Hood as a shift package in this deck, and Prince Naveen as well. Shout out you, RNDT, for getting first place at this Win 2 box tournament. It's looking like there was a first place split at this tournament because we have a blue steel list as well that's in first place by Nemi Minor. Shout out you for getting first place at this tournament with Sapphire Steel playing the Imperial Bow, which we've been seeing in some Sapphire Steel decks. This will give your hero character characters, Challenger and Evasive, which is pretty cool, which means you can challenge opposing evasive characters. That means your Jim Hawkins right here, the 2 strength character, can get rid of some pesky Diablos. And we're not even playing the shift Jim Hawkins in this deck, but we are playing Whole New World, so we do have some 5 cost and stronger characters like Tinkerbell, Giant Fairy. We're playing the 7 cost Uninkable Arthur, which is a shift 5 character. He quests for 3. He has 3 strength, 6 willpower as well. And he has an ability that says when you play this character, chosen character gains the ability to challenge ready characters, resist +2, and challenger +2 for that turn only. So pretty interesting ability. It is a 7 cost character, but hey, you're playing ramp in this deck. You're playing Sail the Azurite Sea, Fishbone Quill as a way to ramp up cards. So you can get to that Arthur pretty quickly. A pretty cool way to handle ward characters in case you don't have any grab your swords. And check this out. We're playing 1 copy of Prepare Your Bot, a 1-cost inkable action card that lets you ready chosen items or ready chosen robot characters. But we're not playing any robot characters in this deck. It looks like we're just trying to re-ready a chosen item. And most of the time, it's probably your lucky dime so that you can use it twice in 1 turn. Especially if you're playing cards like Ariel, the Treasure Collector. She'll quest for 5 if you have the most items on board. And you're playing 4 Fortis Spear, 4 Popsicle, the Imperial Bows, the Fishbone Quills, and the Dimes. So you're probably going to be the player with the most items on the board. In third place of this Win 2 Box tournament, we have a Ruby Amethyst deck by Alistair. This deck looking like a lot of the Ruby Am decks. We are playing locations though. We are playing 3 library instead of 3 castle. I feel like right now you're either playing no locations, you're playing either library or castle. Not both of them anymore. There's not enough room. We had to make room for the genies in this deck. Another person playing 3 rabbit, 3 genie. That seems to be like the perfect ratio. And we're playing 1 copy of Dragonfire. We did see Ed Chu play Dragonfire with Maui Half Shark as well. I kind of want to start playing Maui Half Shark in this deck, especially if we're going to be playing cards like Dragonfire. But Dragonfire is a really good card. It's a 5-cost uninkable action card that simply says Banish Chosen Character. A iconic card from the first chapter that can just remove any character on the board. Obviously, if it doesn't have ward, right? But still pretty powerful in my opinion, and might get me an excuse to play my promo Dragonfires from the DLC. And last but not least, we have an Amber Steel list from the TTG Win a Case tournament by Zachary Power. Shout out you for getting first place with Amber Steel. This is an Amber Steel list that looks a lot more like the Frank Karsten deck that's playing Simba, the future king. This is a 1-cost character that lets you draw and discard a card when you play it, alongside the Simba Protective Cub and the Simba Pride Protector, which is the new Floodborn Simba. 4 strength, 4 willpower, quest for 2, shift 3, and has the ability that everybody loves. At the end of your turn, if this character is exerted, you may ready all your other characters. Pretty cool, pretty strong ability, especially because you can play your Simba Protective Cub exerted already and then shift it on top of it for the same 5 ink if you have that combo. So the Simba comes in exerted already. That way you don't have to wait a whole turn to quest to re-ready all your characters, right? We are playing 2 copies of Gansu, Captain Cranky Head, 3 copies of Sven, which will also re-ready our characters. Love to see that. And then 4 copies of Pluto, the Guard Dog, to protect our 2-cost questers, because we have Smee, Lilo, and our 1-cost quester that can quest for 2, Daisy Duck. Love to see it. This is a very aggressive deck, but also kind of mid-rangey. I think Amber Steel's in a really cool spot where you can kind of go really aggressive against the blue-red decks in the early game, because you are playing Lilo, Smees, and Daisies. But if you're playing against more of an aggressive deck yourself, you can, take a step back and play a little bit more of the control game, because you're still playing Cinderella, Ballroom Sensation with all these songs, and even 1 copy of Along Came Zeus. And I want to talk about this John Silver right here. This is the Cook John Silver. He's a 3-cost inkable character, 3 strength, 3 willpower that says when you play this character, chosen character cannot challenge during their turn. Not too shabby. It's just a good card with a decent stat line. Not as good as Pete, and obviously in my opinion, but still pretty powerful if you're just constantly questing with 2 lore characters like Lilo and Smee, and if you just want to add a little bit more protection. Maybe there's even a world where you quest with your Piglet and you play this John Silver and you stop your opponent's only character on the board, and your Piglet can quest again for 3. So that might be some pretty cool cards to take into consideration from all these decks that we covered today. Thank you guys so much for watching the Lorcana Goons channel. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you're a Lorcana Goon yourself, because it does support the channel. We have European Continentals coming up this weekend, so we're about to see a bunch of meta decks duke it out to see who is going to be crowned the European Continental Champion. This is going to change the meta. This is going to change the game as we know it, so I'm super excited to see who is going to win that event. If you're going, good luck. If you're not going, be sure to stay tuned to Lorcana Goons so you can see what happens and see how it all changes. But until then, we'll see you goons next time.